while you were at the scene, after Miss Reed had been giving CPR, Sean Good interviewed you, correct?
I don't remember a formal interview with Sean Good.
Do you remember talking to him?
When he arrived at the scene, I do remember briefly talking to him after all three of us gave John CPR.
And he asked you certain questions about what you'd seen, what you'd heard, what had happened, correct?
I have to tell you that I remember seeing him there and I remember talking to him, but I do not remember specifics of any conversation or any questions that he asked me.
Do you remember him do you remember him asking you about any initial calls you had and you telling him about that 4:53 call and the early morning calls thereafter, the initial calls before you met up with Miss Reed?
I don't recall.
Did you tell Sergeant Good, by the way, he was a sergeant at the time. Sean Good was a sergeant, not an officer?
I'm not sure.
Okay. By the way, you knew Sergeant Good, did you not?
I didn't know him. I knew of him, like I knew his name, but that was it.
How'd you know of him before that day?
Because his sister is a year or two younger than me, and I knew she had a brother that was younger, that was a Canton cop, just through the town, but I didn't know him.
Okay, friendly but not friends.
I wouldn't even say I was friendly with him.
Okay. You actually told Sergeant Good at the time, when he asked about those first phone calls, that when Miss Reed called you, she was inquiring about John's whereabouts, correct?
Again, I don't recall my conversations with Sean Good.
You certainly never mentioned to Sergeant Good the incessant screaming and hysteria that you've described here in court.
Objection.
Sustained.
Did you ever mention anything about an argument or a fight to Sean Good?
Objection.
Sustained, Mr. Jackson. She said she didn't remember. Next question.
I have to go through the series of machinations. I don't know what she remembers and doesn't remember.
Next question, Mr. Jackson.
Did you mention anything about a cracked taillight to Sergeant Good?
Objection.
Sustained.
Do you have no memory at all about what you talked to Sergeant Good about?
There were many officers there,
Right.
and like I said, I know I talked to Sergeant Good, but I do not remember the specifics of my conversation during that chaotic scene.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Let me ask a different question. There were many officers there, and many officers were asking you questions, correct?
Correct.
Did you did you tell any officer while at the scene that during those first few phone calls, first couple of phone calls with Miss Reed, that there was incessant screaming and hysteria?
Again, there were many officers asking me questions. Most of them were regarding who John was, if he had medical issues or concerns, things like that.
Right.
It was a chaotic scene. I don't remember any specific questions about phone calls. I apologize.
But you did tell at least one officer about the initial phone call that you received indicating that John may be missing, correct?
I possibly said I got a phone call and that's why I'm here. We all came out to look for him. I apologize for not remembering specifics.
Did you tell any officer at the scene anything about an argument or fighting that Miss Reed said occurred on that first couple of phone calls?
Again, the conversations were very brief and they were with a lot of different officers. There wasn't
yes or no?
in-depth conversations.
It's yes or no, Mr. McCabe.
Let her answer the question.
Do you recall, that is a yes or no question, do you recall telling any officer about a conversation in the initial couple of phone calls that you had with Miss Reed about fighting or being in an argument? Do you recall that?
I cannot answer yes or no.
Well, you either do or you don't. If you don't,
I said
say
there
you
was
don't.
many different conversations. I am not sure.
So you don't recall?
I'm not sure on specific conversations about that. I apologize.
Is there a reason why you're not telling us that you simply don't recall making that statement?
Sustained.
Do you recall telling any officer about a cracked taillight that came up in one of those first two phone calls?
At the scene?
At the scene.
Again, I think all the conversations were about what was happening in the present time.
And literally, this was a couple of hours after this incident, correct? When everything was freshest in your mind.
These conversations were at the scene when Miss Reed was running around screaming.
Were you also interviewed by Officer Mullaney?
Again, there were many officers there that I spoke to.
Ms. McCabe, do you understand my question? Did you understand the last question I asked you?
If I spoke to an officer, Mullaney?
Correct.
Again, I could have. I am not sure. I don't remember every officer. It was a chaotic scene. I had just found my friend on the ground.
So the answer is, I don't remember. Correct?
I don't remember speaking to him. No, sorry.
Later that morning, you did have a conversation with Officer Lank that you actually do remember, correct?
Yes, correct.
What you told Officer Lank, or Sergeant Lank, was that you received a phone call from Kaylee's phone and that Karen Reed was distraught because John never came home, correct?
I told him she was, I don't remember the exact words, but I told him something like she was hysterical and screaming and said John never came home.
You never mentioned that she said anything about a fight during that initial phone call, correct?
Again, I'm not sure what exactly was said during that initial phone call.
You never mentioned that she said something about a cracked taillight in that initial phone call or those two phone calls, correct?
Are these phone calls with who? Who are these phone calls? Who am I speaking
The
to at this
initial
point?
phone calls that you had with Miss Reed,
Yes.
you never mentioned to Officer Lank or Sergeant Lank that Miss Reed mentioned anything about a fight or an argument, correct?
I don't remember.
You never mentioned anything about Miss Reed saying anything about a cracked taillight in one of those two initial phone calls, correct?
Again, I don't remember all the things that I told Officer Lank.
And you certainly never mentioned that Miss Reed said anything about could I have hit him in either of those initial phone calls, correct?
Again, I don't remember my specific conversation with Officer Lank.
So you don't remember the conversation that you had with Officer Lank when it was the clear light of day. You had had a chance to take a beat and a breath, catch your breath, because it's now 11:30, 11 o'clock in the morning. You don't remember anything about that conversation. But according to your testimony, you remember in detail what my client said, waking you out of a dead sleep. Correct?
So I didn't speak to him at 11:30. It was earlier in the morning when he came back to Fairview.
Let's call it 9 o'clock. Whatever.
Okay.
Right? Whatever. It wasn't the same chaos as my client screaming into the phone that John never came home, waking you out of a dead sleep, correct?
Correct.
But when you recounted that conversation or those conversations to Sergeant Lank, you didn't say a thing about Miss Reed saying that there had been an argument, did you?
I'm saying I don't remember the specifics of my conversation with Officer Lank. I'm also saying that I was woken up out of a dead sleep. Karen showed up at my house screaming. I went out to help her look for John. And then we found one of my closest friends on the front lawn. And she was saying crazy things and acting crazy and
Ms. McCabe,
acting
that's not my
erratic.
question.
And so every
Ms. McCabe,
police
that is
officer
not
that
my
I
question.
spoke to,
Let her finish.
every police officer that I spoke to, I tried to answer their questions the best I could. It took me hours and in some cases days to remember all the things that Miss Reed had said. My mind, I was in a state of shock. But the minute I remembered, she said, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. I called Officer Lank.
And your memory's getting better even as we sit here today, correct?
There are certain things I will never forget, Mr. Jackson.
Including the fact that you never, ever, ever said, she said the words I hit him to a grand jury when you were asked about it 3 months after the incident, correct?
She said, I hit him, I hit him, I hit
You
him.
never told that to the grand jury, did you?
I don't remember specifically that every grand jury and everything I said, but I can tell you with 100% accuracy, she screamed, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him.
And you never said that to the grand jurors.
I don't recall if I
You were
did.
there to get the truth, correct?
The truth is, she said, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him.
You were asked that specific question at the grand jury. What did she say at the scene in front of the female EMT? And you know what your answer was? You do, because you just read it.
I wasn't asked what she was said
What
at the
was the
scene.
answer to that question?
I'm objecting.
The objection sustained. Ask one more clear question, Mr. Jackson.
What was the answer you gave in answer to the question about what was said by Miss Reed to the EMT, the female EMT at the scene? What did you say she said?
I don't know if I was asked specifically what she said to a female EMT.
All right, we're going to end this now.
Your Honor, may I have one more question?
Go ahead.
I can't end it like this. You said,
Okay,
she
jurors,
said.
ignore the comments of counsel. Ask one question, Mr. Jackson.
You said that she said, could I have hit him? Did I hit him in the presence of the female EMT? That's what you testified to under oath at the grand jury, isn't it?
Yes, because she also said that.
All right. So, folks, we are done for today. You remember tomorrow is the day that we're not in session. So we will see you Friday. Friday is a full day. And I have to give you those questions. You can stay and file out after the jurors.